Donald Trump's real estate empire is officially on the auction block. Right now, at this very moment, the state of New York has legal authority to seize his golf courses, his estates, even Trump Tower itself. We're not talking about potential consequences months from now. We're talking about sheriffs showing up, changing locks, and removing Trump's name from buildings he's owned for decades. This is how the self-proclaimed king of real estate is losing his crown. And the numbers? They're staggering. A 92-page court ruling just dropped. Judge Arthur Engoron has ordered Trump to pay $354 million in fraud penalties. Add in co-defendants and interest? The total exceeds $464 million. And that number grows every single day Trump doesn't pay. But here's where this becomes unprecedented. Judge Engoron authorized immediate asset seizures. Not after appeals. Not after negotiations. Starting right now, the state can begin ripping away everything Trump built his identity on. 7 Springs Estate. Trump National Golf Clubs. Bank accounts frozen. Properties seized. The empire that made him famous is being systematically dismantled. 2 weeks ago, on December 28, Judge Engoron made it crystal clear: no more delays, no more excuses. Asset seizures proceed immediately. Trump owes over $464 million and hasn't posted the bond to pause enforcement. So Attorney General Letitia James is moving in like a surgical strike team. Stick around, because what happens next gets even more shocking.
We actually want to get right to Kara Scannell. Kara, do we have a ruling in the Donald Trump civil fraud trial case?
Yeah, we do, Boris. We just got the ruling. It is 92 pages long, and I'm scanning through it right now. But when I'm looking at these numbers, the totals that the judge is ordering collectively in the case, so this will include all of the defendants, I'm getting a total of $362 million. And I'm just scrolling through this now. I can see that there's the dollar amount specific to Donald Trump. I'm going to use a calculator to do some rough math. It gets us to, for Donald Trump, about $354 million. That's for him, the company, the Trump Organization. So very close to what the New York Attorney General's office was seeking of $370 million. There's a lot of zeros here and a lot of other numbers, but roughly $354 million is the judgment against Donald Trump. The judge also found that his son, Eric Trump, is liable.
This ruling doesn't just hit Trump's wallet. It shreds his entire identity. For 40 years, Donald Trump's public persona has been built on one thing: successful businessman, real estate mogul, self-made billionaire. The man with his name in gold letters on buildings across America, that carefully constructed image is collapsing under the weight of documented fraud. And Attorney General Letitia James? She's not wasting a single second. She's already targeting high-value properties with military precision. Her primary objective, the 7 Springs estate in Westchester County. Appraised value? Over $100 million. She's also moving on Trump National Golf Club in Briarcliff Manor and Trump National in Colts Neck, New Jersey. Multiple golf courses. Multiple revenue streams. All about to vanish. Trump's response has been pure chaos. He's lashing out on Truth Social, calling this election interference and a deep state asset grab. He's even threatened to pardon himself, a legally meaningless gesture that only exposes his desperation. Presidential pardons don't work on state civil judgments. His threats are completely empty. But they reveal something important. Trump knows he's cornered. None of his social media meltdowns change the legal reality. The judge's order stands. The seizures are happening. Trump's empire is genuinely at risk of total collapse, but wait until you hear what the Independent Monitor discovered. That's coming up in just 60 seconds.
Correspondent to talk about what she is seeing here, with our understanding here, Paula, that this is really kind of hot off the presses, this ruling.
Yes, the paper is still warm, but we're going through it right now. And as you and Kara were talking about, this case is so personal because it represents such a threat to Trump's business, his family business, and his identity. Remember, it was his identity as a businessman that brought him fame before he arrived at the White House. But in looking at the summary of this ruling, we see, in addition to the monetary penalties that Kara just laid out, They have found him liable for fraud, and they are going to continue the appointment of an independent monitor. So back in 2022, the judge installed a monitor to keep an eye on exactly what the Trump Organization was doing when it came to its business dealings. Now, among the things this monitor uncovered were a $48 million loan, for example, to the company itself, but there was no paperwork.
A $48 million loan to the Trump Organization itself. Zero documentation. No paperwork. No proper records, just millions of dollars moving through the company with no legitimate paper trail whatsoever. This is textbook fraud. And it's exactly why Judge Engoron's patience finally evaporated. Let's rewind to January 6th of this year. Trump had a complete meltdown in the courtroom. Lost control. Started shouting. The judge had him physically removed from proceedings. Engoron had given Trump numerous chances, extending deadlines, allowing appeals to proceed, showing remarkable judicial restraint. Most judges would have cracked down months earlier. Trump repaid that patience by claiming he'd arranged a bond through Knight Specialty Insurance. But that bond only covered a fraction of what he owes. And he's completely failed to secure the rest. The judge reached his breaking point. The message was simple: if you can't pay, we're seizing your assets. Period. The December 28 order is surgically precise. It authorizes the New York Attorney General to freeze every Trump bank account in the state. He cannot access those funds. He cannot transfer money. He cannot shuffle assets around to hide them from creditors. He's financially paralyzed. The order also targets specific properties for physical seizure. And I'm not talking about symbolic legal moves. I'm talking about the state literally taking ownership. 7 Springs Estate, over $100 million, 213 acres in Westchester County. Trump National Golf Club, Briarcliff Manor, Premier Tournament Golf Course. Trump National Golf Club, Colts Neck, New Jersey. Yes, the order extends beyond New York's borders. These aren't just buildings sitting empty. They're operating businesses with employees, members, tournaments, revenue streams. And the state is taking control of everything. Now here's what most people don't understand about how asset seizure actually works. The mechanics matter, because they're absolutely devastating. Let me break down exactly how New York is dismantling Trump's empire, step by surgical step. Restraining notices. The Attorney General files notices with banks stating Trump owes money and his accounts must be frozen. Banks have zero choice in the matter. It's a court order. Trump's accounts at Chase, Deutsche Bank, and other major institutions are now frozen solid. He cannot withdraw funds. He cannot make transfers. He cannot pay employees or vendors. This creates an immediate operational crisis. His businesses rely on cash flow to pay staff, cover mortgages, handle operating expenses. Without access to those accounts, the Trump Organization faces cascading failures across multiple properties. Imagine running a billion-dollar business empire and suddenly you can't access your own money. That's Trump's reality right now. Property seizures. The state files paperwork with county clerks to officially transfer ownership. Once that happens, they control absolutely everything. They can sell properties at auction, lease them out, manage them directly. All profits go toward Trump's judgment. Here's the part that has to hurt the most. Once seized, Trump has zero say in what happens. His name gets stripped from the deeds. He loses all control. The properties that bore his name in gold letters for decades will be rebranded and sold off as generic real estate. For a man whose entire identity is wrapped up in seeing his name on buildings, this isn't just financial loss, this is psychological destruction. Letitia James has been absolutely clear about her intentions. She's publicly called Trump a fraud who owes New York hundreds of millions. And she's made collecting every single penny her personal mission. She's brought in asset recovery specialists, forensic accountants, and investigators who specialize in hunting down hidden money and ensuring compliance. If Trump thinks he can hide assets offshore or in shell companies, he's about to learn a very expensive lesson. Now let me tell you about the shell transfer evidence that really made Judge Engoron furious. Because this is where Trump's fraud becomes undeniable. Investigators from Letitia James' office discovered Trump has been playing an elaborate financial shell game. That he'd move money from one business to another, then to a third, then to a fourth, creating complex transaction webs specifically designed to obscure where the money actually ends up. The judge interpreted this as crystal clear evidence of fraud. Trump isn't just refusing to pay. He's actively trying to hide assets from the court. Engoron warned Trump directly, if you keep trying to conceal assets, there will be severe consequences. We're talking contempt of court charges, which carry massive fines or even jail time. Let that sink in for a moment. A former president potentially jailed for contempt because he refused to disclose bank accounts to comply with a court order. It sounds extreme, but judges have enormous power to enforce their orders. If Trump continues defying the court, Engoron can absolutely lock him up for contempt, and here's the kicker. Trump brought this on himself with his bond situation. After the February 2024 judgment, Trump was supposed to post bond for the full amount while appealing. That's standard procedure. Posting bond means paying a bond company to guarantee payment if your appeal fails. It protects the creditor. Trump claimed he'd secured a bond through Knight Specialty Insurance. But that bond only covers approximately $175 million. That leaves a $289 million gap from the required $464 million total. The judge was not impressed. He stated Trump must post the full amount or begin making payments immediately. Trump's lawyers jumped in, arguing it's impossible to secure a bond for the total. They claim no bond company will take on that level of risk given Trump's complicated finances. Translation: nobody trusts Trump to pay them back. Since he can't post the full bond, his lawyers begged the judge to pause enforcement until the appeal concludes. Judge Engoron refused. His logic was airtight: if you can't meet the bond requirement, the judgment stands and asset seizures proceed. That's the whole point of bond requirements, protecting creditors. So what does Trump do? He goes full meltdown mode with threats that make no legal sense whatsoever. Trump's Truth Social feed has become a masterclass in legal desperation. He's claiming he'll pardon himself and reverse this judgment and make it all disappear with presidential authority. None of that is remotely how anything works. Presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes. This is a state civil judgment from New York. The president cannot intervene in state court proceedings. Full stop. His talk of self-pardons reveals pure panic. He's throwing out ideas that have zero legal foundation because he's in complete crisis mode. But here's what I want to know from you watching this: do you think these asset seizures are a fair legal consequence, or is this going too far? Drop your opinion in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's talk about what happens to these properties once they're seized. Because this gets complicated fast, these aren't vacant buildings collecting dust. They're operating businesses with staff on payroll, members paying dues, events booked months in advance. The state has three main options. Option 1, keep the businesses running and collect all revenue. Option 2, hire management companies to operate them. Option 3, sell them immediately at auction. Letitia James is pushing hard for quick sales. She wants to convert these properties to cash that directly pays down the judgment. But here's the problem nobody's talking about: Trump's name on these properties is toxic. It's radioactive. Buyers don't want the political baggage. They don't want the protests. They don't want half the country boycotting their golf course because it used to be Trump's. The state will almost certainly need to completely rebrand everything. Strip Trump's name from buildings. Remove the gold letters. Market them as generic luxury properties with zero Trump association. For Trump, this might hurt worse than losing the properties themselves. His entire brand identity revolves around his name being visible. Seeing it physically removed from his assets, replaced with somebody else's name? That's the ultimate humiliation for a man whose ego is his defining characteristic. But wait, there's a bigger picture here that connects directly to impeachment. And the timing is absolutely not a coincidence. The timing of these asset seizures raises serious questions, especially with impeachment momentum building in Congress. Representative Al Green has introduced articles of impeachment that specifically cite Trump's attempts to usurp power, including his absurd claims that he can pardon himself from state civil judgments. Democrats are arguing this demonstrates Trump believes he's literally above the law. Which is exactly what they're trying to prove for impeachment. Think about this timeline: January 6th, Trump removed from courtroom for unhinged behavior. December 28th, judge authorizes immediate asset seizures. January 15th, Trump's scheduled deposition. These events aren't isolated incidents. They're connected. The judge witnessed Trump's courtroom meltdown and likely concluded he'd never comply voluntarily. Forced seizure became necessary because waiting for Trump to cooperate would mean waiting forever. And the timing right before his January 15th deposition? That's strategic. When Trump sits down to testify, he'll be thinking about the properties being ripped away from him. That affects his mental state. Makes him angry. Distracted. More likely to say something damaging that create new legal problems. Speaking of legal problems, let's talk about the financial devastation this causes. Because the numbers are genuinely catastrophic. Trump's net worth is primarily tied up in real estate. This isn't like having stocks you can sell. These are physical properties that generate his cash flow. Losing them isn't just embarrassing. It's financially apocalyptic. Let's run the numbers. 7 Springs alone, $100+ million. Trump National Golf Clubs combined, $50 to $100 million total immediately on the chopping block, $150 to $200 million minimum. But here's the terrifying part for Trump: if these properties don't cover the full $464 million judgment, the state doesn't stop, they keep seizing assets. Trump Tower could be next. 40 Wall Street. His Florida properties. Virtually anything he owns anywhere becomes vulnerable, and don't forget about the income these properties generate. Golf courses pull in millions from memberships, tournaments, corporate events. 7 Springs likely produces substantial rental or estate income. Once seized, that revenue stream disappears completely. This cripples Trump's ability to operate his remaining businesses, pay his army of lawyers, or fund political activities. Everything gets exponentially harder when your cash flow is strangled. Then there's the reputational nuclear bomb. Trump's entire public brand for 40 years has been built on one core identity: successful billionaire real estate developer. Now his properties are being seized because he can't pay a fraud judgment that destroys the brand completely. He can no longer credibly claim to be a successful businessman when his assets are being auctioned off to satisfy creditors. It screams failure. It confirms what critics have said for decades, that he built his empire on fraud and inflated valuations, and now that foundation of lies is crumbling. The political consequences? They're massive. Trump's approval rating sits at 37%. With these asset seizures dominating every news cycle, that number will likely crater even further. Voters are watching a crystal clear narrative unfold: Trump is con artist who inflated his wealth, committed systematic fraud, and is now facing devastating consequences. That's an impossible sell for swing voters considering supporting him for president again. Democrats are already running campaign ads showcasing Trump's properties being seized. Their message is surgical: this is what happens when you elect a criminal. Vote Democrat to restore integrity. Trump's hardcore base sees this completely differently. They believe he's being persecuted. They think the deep state is destroying him for fighting back against corruption. This sentiment is driving increased donations and strengthening their loyalty. In some ways, these seizures are rallying his base even harder, but here's the fatal problem: his base alone cannot win elections. They represent maybe 35 to 40% of the electorate. If the majority turns against him, which polling suggests is happening, he's finished politically, and his desperation is becoming more obvious every single day. Trump's threats about pardoning himself reveal exactly how cornered he feels. He's grasping at legal straws, making wild claims that fall apart under basic scrutiny. His options are genuinely limited. He can't pay what he owes. He can't stop the seizures. He's watching everything he spent 40 years building collapse in real time. So he's throwing out whatever desperate ideas come to mind, hoping anything will stick. I can only imagine how frustrated his legal team must be. Trump keeps going public with statements that actively hurt his case. He's practically admitting to trying to hide assets. He's threatening judges. He's discussing pardons in ways that undermine his credibility and strengthen impeachment arguments. His lawyers cannot control him. They cannot stop him from posting on Truth Social at 3 a.m. And he keeps digging the hole deeper. Now let's talk about the impeachment evidence, because these asset seizures have become concrete proof for multiple charges. Asset seizures have become smoking gun evidence for several impeachment articles: the usurpation charge, Trump trying to claim powers that aren't his, attempting to overrule state courts with non-existent presidential authority; the abuse of power charge, using his office to dodge legal consequences, threatening to pardon himself, attacking judges who rule against him. It's all about escaping accountability. Which is exactly what impeachment focuses on. When House oversight hearings begin later this month, Democrats will absolutely spotlight these seizures. They'll showcase how Trump tried hiding assets through shell transfers, how he claimed he could pardon himself from a state judgment, how he attacked judges for enforcing the law. All of it paints a picture of a desperate man who's losing control and believes he's above the law, and they'll argue this proves he's fundamentally unfit for office. Now let's look at what the American people actually think about all this. Because public opinion matters enormously. 60% of Americans believe Trump should be held accountable for fraud. That's not a narrow majority. That's a solid supermajority. And here's what's really significant. That includes substantial numbers of Republicans. Even people who support some of Trump's policies cannot stomach fraud and corruption. If they believe he committed fraud, they think he should face real consequences. When the state seizes assets, it sends a powerful message: you broke the law. Now you pay the price. Most Americans support that concept. It's a fundamental principle of justice. And that's a massive political win for Democrats heading into 2026 elections. They can run on a platform of accountability. We made sure Trump faced consequences for his criminal actions. Voters are exhausted from watching wealthy elites escape justice. When Trump's assets get seized, it sends an unmistakable signal. Nobody is untouchable. Not even a former president. But here's the flip side: Trump's supporters are absolutely fired up. They feel he's being unfairly targeted. They're ready to mobilize, vote, donate, protest. That passion is genuine and intense. The critical question is whether that energy translates into enough votes. Trump's base represents 35 to 40% of the electorate. If the majority rallies against him, he loses. Which means Democrats win. So what happens after the seizures? Let's look at the endgame. Once the state seizes these properties, they'll eventually be sold off. And that's going to create a media firestorm. Imagine these headlines. Trump Tower sold at auction. 7 Springs under new ownership. Trump National Golf Club rebranded. Each sale becomes another public reminder of Trump's downfall. Another confirmation that he's a fraud who lost everything. There's even a real possibility Trump might try to physically prevent seizures. He could call on his supporters to block the state from taking his properties. That could get extremely dangerous. We've seen how Trump motivates his followers to extreme actions. If supporters attempt obstructing court-ordered seizures, it could lead to violent confrontations, arrests, chaos. That would only compound Trump's legal nightmares. It would look like inciting resistance against court orders. Obstruction of justice. Contempt. Potentially new criminal charges. Big picture, these asset seizures represent the systematic unraveling of Trump's empire, the foundation of his entire public identity for 40 years. Everything is crumbling. The properties. The wealth. The brand he spent decades building. It's collapsing because he committed systematic fraud and genuinely believed he'd never face consequences. Now Trump is staring directly at financial ruin, political collapse, and potential criminal charges. Everything is hitting at once. And he knows this might genuinely be the end of the line. He'll likely lose his most valuable properties. He could be impeached and removed from office. He might even face prison time for contempt. The law is finally catching up. His defenses are failing. He's cornered with no good options. The debt keeps growing. What started as a $454 million judgment has ballooned to $464 million with interest. And that interest accumulates every single day he doesn't pay. The state won't stop seizing assets until they collect the full amount. If his New York properties don't cover it, they'll go after properties in other states. Mar-a-Lago in Florida could be next. By the time this is finished, Trump could genuinely have nothing left. No properties. No wealth. No political power. Just a legacy defined by fraud and catastrophic loss. It's a textbook case of how empires built on lies eventually crumble. And right now, in real time, we're watching Trump's empire unravel. The seizures will continue. More properties taken. More bank accounts frozen. More pieces of his empire sold off. Trump will keep fighting back, posting desperate threats on Truth Social, attacking judges, making empty promises, but none of that changes the fundamental reality. The law says he owes $464 million. If he can't pay, his assets get seized. That's how accountability works when nobody is above the law. This story is far from over. More seizures are coming. More dramatic developments. More twists as Trump's legal nightmares intensify. So here's what I need you to do. If you want to stay updated on every seizure, every sale, every development as this unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update, and drop a comment below. Do you think these asset seizures are justified, or is this going too far? What property do you think gets seized next? Let's discuss in the comments. This is the fall of Trump's empire, and we're tracking every moment.